So welcome back to Photoshop. So today we're going to be going over curves and why I basically only use curves to tone images. Now I do use hue saturation a lot and some other things, but what I'm talking about here is just your general brightness and color adjustments. So Photoshop has a whole bunch of different ways to do the exact same thing. Do we really need to know those? Well, the short answer is no. The long answer is kind of, because sometimes there's a better way to do something or an easier way to do something, but I think that has to do with more of selections and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you why I only use curves and not any of the other basic editing functions in Photoshop. So if we come up here to image and adjustments, we will see we've got brightness, levels, curves, and exposure. Now these are the four main items I'm talking about. So we have four items and I basically only use one. There's also shadows and highlights down here, but we'll get into that specifically in the end. So let's just go to brightness contrast first. So brightness contrast is really easy. It just makes it brighter or increases the contrast. That's great. So I'll hit cancel. So then we're going to go back up to image, adjustments, and we'll go to exposure first because it's very similar. So exposure is just changing your basic exposure. All right. So that two items, basically all they're doing is changing your exposure. So the next one we're going to go into is levels. And levels is the first kind of advanced function inside Photoshop. So here we can do brightness, but this is the gamma, this is your highlights, and this is your shadows. So not only can you control the highlights, the sort of if you think of this as the midtones and this is the shadows, you can also control your contrast as well. So here we're flattening out our image, and here we're darkening our highlights, which is great. It gives us a little bit more functionality. What's great though about levels is not only can we change brightness and contrast, but we can also change color as well by coming in here and adjusting this. So if what happens is in the levels panel, if we have to brighten or darken our image a little bit, if it's a little bit off color, we can easily come in and adjust colors to make them exactly how we want to. So most of this is toning that you're doing that's global, meaning it's affecting the whole image at this point. So this is what I'm looking at. It's a global tone. But all of this applies to selective toning as well. So let's hit cancel. So the last one, or we'll go down here to shadow highlights first. And so shadow highlights is you're just basically able to come in here and really adjust your shadows or your highlights a lot. So there are times where I think this could maybe be helpful, but truthfully, I've never used it in Photoshop, and I've been using Photoshop for 30 years. The last one we're going to go to is image mode, adjustments, and curves. And this is the panel that I use the most. And the reason I use curves over levels, those are really the only two I would consider using, is because you even have more ability to adjust the photo. You just had sliders and there was not much you can do. But in a curve, you can really actually change that curve by setting multiple points through it to get it exactly how you want it. Now, you would never most likely set this many points in a curve unless you want to do something really funky. So we're going to reset that. So right here we have making our brights or our highlights brighter. This is kind of controlling your contrast, but it's flattening or darkening your highlights or your image overall. But what's great is, and this is why I like curves, let's say we wanted to just darken those highlights, but we didn't really want to adjust too much else inside the photo. just like bam. You can take that curve back up to its center line. So all it's really doing is this little adjustment right here. I'm going to throw that away and take the highlights back up. So here we can flatten out our contrast and increase our contrast. So this is making our highlights a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. Now I'm saying sort of on the highlights. Remember, you can bring this back down if you only want that subtle curve right there in your brightness. If you want to do it in the shadows, you want to brighten your shadows or darken your shadows, and then you can easily bring that curve back up to where it should be. You will notice I don't use set white, set black, or gray. I pretty much never use it because, well, if you want to watch some of the earlier videos on why I don't use white, black, and gray, first of all, you should never set white, but once you get good at toning, you'll understand why that I don't really set black too often. I can pretty much tell where it's at. But a lot of times by setting black, it actually makes your image much too contrasty. So if you wonder how I'm resetting this, I'm just holding the Alt option and then going up here and clicking on Reset. So we can make our tonal or adjustment in our curve, and we can set lots of cool points. And just like levels, we can come in here and adjust subtle color. So if I wanted to make this a little bit more blue or a little bit more red, if I want to come in, and believe me, you wouldn't think you would use this a lot. I use it a lot. So if I want to come in here and adjust this, so depending on how I want that to look. Now, one thing I'll use curves a lot for is actually color grading and toning as well. So it allows me to just go into specific colors and adjust the color grading in curves. So not only can I do brightness, contrast, just like in all the others, I can also do simple color corrections as well. So I'm able to do a whole bunch of stuff in one adjustment. So there's no reason to come up here and go image, adjust, brightness, contrast, and then go down to color balance or go to hue saturation when I can just do all of that in curves. So is there anything wrong with doing it the other way? No, but it just is a faster process to just use curves. It has the most flexibility as far as adjustment and getting things close to how they're going to be right. And I do this for not only global but also selective adjustments. So hopefully that was helpful. That is why I only use curves for basic adjustments. Now let me tell you, this has to, what I say I only use curves, that is only for these adjustments here. I do use hue saturation a lot and occasionally color balance. But my two main things I use to actually tone images are curves and hue saturation. Most of my color adjustment is done with actually hue saturation, not color balance. So thanks for watching. Hopefully that was helpful today. You learned a little something about Photoshop and curves and why I use them. So any comments or questions, you can leave those below, and don't forget to subscribe.